in operations, one very important concept is the strategy, which we would like to adopt when we determine what process we're going to adopt in our operations. Let me give you a first example on the importance of strategy. And the example comes from a famous manufacturer from the United States, Harley Davidson. Harley Davidson is the only one left motorcycle company in the US for a reason, because in over the 50s, 60s, there was a market entry from many Japanese manufacturers in the US, which completely reshaped the landscape of the motorcycle industry. So here, the key point is that Harley Davidson was able to react to this event, and instead of going bankrupt like all the other motorcycle manufacturers in the US, they revamped their processes. And how did they do so? They enhanced the quality. They adopted the very technique and methodology from Japanese manufacturing, including the idea of lean manufacturing. They implemented a system that enabled them to reduce inventory, to reduce the stock. This is the so-called materials as needed system. But at the same time, they were able to achieve variation. So to achieve high level, one of the highest level of customization in the motorbike industry. And they did so whilst they were able also to reduce the task and try to schedule as much as possible repetitive tasks together in a very tight way. So at this point, I'm just giving you this example of Harley Davidson, but throughout this video lecture, we're going to see what Harley Davidson is trying to do. So we will see what is the current process. What is the current position in terms of process strategy of Harley Davidson, in the aim, the objective, the direction that Harley Davidson would like to achieve by implementing a new process strategy. So keep this information in the background first. Keep the information related to what Harley Davidson emphasized on, from a reduced inventory to high level of customization to tightly schedule of repetitive activity, because throughout the video lecture, we're going to examine, we're going to analyze specifically each of these concepts. In this slide, you can see a bit more in detail the process flow diagram of Harley Davidson. So how they are now arranging the processes to ensure that they are meeting the expectation of Harley Davidson clients. Harley Davidson clients are very special clients. They're very loyal type of clients. They're very committed to the brand. Harley Davidson is generally a case which we study also in marketing, which we study also in consumer behavior. The customer of Harley Davidson, they generally group in clubs. They do have very distinct characteristics. And this is to keep in mind that operations are a way to meet your customer expectation. So what Harley Davidson did was essentially to improve their operations to achieve, to meet the very demanding requirements of their customers. Customers that are super loyal, that know very well the product, and that request from the product a very high level of customization, because all of them would like to have a special, unique bike, their own bike. Without further ado, let's now move into the video lecture and let's examine different types of process strategies. In this video lecture, we will first go through an introduction on process strategies. We will see how process strategies relate to outsourcing And finally, we will examine the different choices in terms of process strategy. First, what is process strategy? We can define process strategy as the objective to create a process which allow us to meet customer requirements. However, we always have constraints. In management, we always have constraints. Cost constraints, time constraints, decision-making constraints, and so on. So our process strategy must consider all these limitations. Part of a process strategy is represented by process planning. So in the process, so in the group of tasks which we create to create specific outputs, we will perform different activities. First one will be how we are going to design our process, how we are going to coordinate a different task, how we are going to coordinate a function in the people that will be assigned to this task. This leads to our strategy. So how we combine all these designs together as to meet our customer expectation. And the planning. Planning will primarily relate to the scheduling of activities and the instruction which we will give to our employees as to fulfill the expected activities. This matrix summarizes the most important concept of process strategies. We are going to see that there are 4 choices when it comes to process strategies. Choices which highly depend on the industry in the type of volume which we would like to achieve, as well as the flexibility that our industry, our market requires us to achieve. So by combining these 2 dimensions, the volume dimension, which you can see here in this slide plotted in the horizontal axis, with the flexibility dimension, which is plotted on the vertical axis in this slide, we will identify these 4 main choices: the process focus, the repetitive focus, the product focus, and what is now the major trend, what is now the main objective that companies try to achieve, which is the mass customization. Here you can find also some example of companies that adopted these type of processes. So in process focus, an example could be hospital. In repetitive focus, an example is a manufacturer like Harley Davidson, our introductory case. In product focus, here we could find as an example food production. Frito-Lay and chips are an example of this. And Dell Computer is an example of mass customization. How do we select the process? So as we know, the process selection will initially stem from demand forecast. So on our estimation, and based on this forecast, when we will adopt the different type of processes, we know that depending on the volume, depending on our expected demand, we can differentiate between projects that are generally the most flexible type of production, the most flexible type of process, batch production, the mass production, leading then to the continuous production. So the continuous production is generally for high volume, for commodity products. Batch production and mass production will generally be adopted throughout every product life cycle. So the batch production will be adopted at the beginning of a growth stage in the product life cycle, and the mass production is usually the type of process adopted throughout the adult stage of a product, so after the rapid growth stage. One important point to keep in mind when we select our process strategies is how many processes are we going to outsource and how many processes will be performed within our company. These will impact on our decision making, on our cost structure, and so on. So when we decide about the outsourcing, we ask a few questions to the organization. So we ask whether it would be cheaper to produce internally or to purchase from third parties. We also need to understand whether we have a capacity to produce the products internally. We need to ensure that if we do so internally, we are meeting our quality requirements. If we are not producing internally, we need to ensure that we are able to control the quality provided by our suppliers. Other factors to consider will relate to the speed, whether we need something fast and we are able to produce it fast, or whether we can assign vendors to do this for us. And here we also need to consider logistics, transportation, and so on. Reliability, which essentially means that we are on time and we provide quality products on time. And one important factor to consider is also the intellectual property, the expertise. In some cases, we can do this in-house. In some other cases, we need to hire someone to do this for us. To an extent, when we decide whether to perform some activities in our company or to outsource such activities, we can use a spectrum, we can use a continuum. So according to this spectrum, so we will have a high involvement of our suppliers or other companies when we form a joint venture. Joint venture means that we are forming a legal entity in which our company and our suppliers or our partners are also providing equity. So in this case, both of us will be shareholders of a new joint venture. In this way, we are really partnering on same ground, and we also share the ownership of a business vehicle. A strategic alliance. So a strategic alliance is given by a long-term collaboration. Generally, this is a type of collaboration which is quite usual in the Japanese context, where suppliers and their clients are used to collaborate for a very long period of time. There is a habit to emphasize on this type of collaboration instead of like shorter term type of collaboration with the suppliers. And then the lowest type of involvement will be essentially single contract. So this is when you appoint a supplier for a specific activity or for a specific supply, and then you are not planning to appoint that supplier again. So you may wonder when you plan to do this, and generally this is when you try to minimize the cost. And so you always let your suppliers compete against each other to provide you the best quotation. So this is a more short-sighted kind of approach, but in some circumstances or for some activities where maybe quality is not that critical, so this could be a way to actually choose the strategy to adopt. As I mentioned earlier, we have essentially four main choices that we can choose from when selecting our process strategy. These four main choices are the consequence of how we are organizing our company. So we need to look at the vertical integration of a company. The vertical integration is tightly linked to what we just analyzed about the outsourcing. So essentially, vertical integration means that the company is also performing some activities in different layers in different tiers of a value chain. To give you an example of vertical integration, using a case from automotive. So it's automotive company like Toyota performing activities that are related to the distribution. So Toyota owning dealership and distribution network. So that's a case of vertical integration. Other case of vertical integration would refer to in backwards integration. So this is a company that is performing activities that are done from the supply chain perspective. So in the example that I just shared, that would be the case of Toyota, performing activities that are generally done by suppliers. So Toyota producing parts that will be used in the manufacturing of cars, which also happens. So Toyota did vertical integration in both ways. So did vertical integration, forward integration into the distribution area, owning dealership and so on. Toyota also did backwards integration, owning suppliers. Case in point is Denso, which is a supplier of Toyota. It's part of Toyota Group, and they produce parts used in Toyota cars. So this is one factor, the vertical integration. The other factor is the capital intensity. So the mix of capital, for example, the level of automation, the investment required, how many people, the size of the workforce that are used in the transformation process. A third factor to consider is the flexibility, how flexible the process are. Of course, the flexibility is not only up to our company, it's up to the customer requirement. In the example of Harley Davidson, is the requirements, the specific requirements coming from Harley Davidson customer, from a very loyal customer base who is looking for very special, very unique type of bikes, but other factors influencing the process flexibility will relate to the technology or the availability of components to be used in our processes. And the last one is our involvement from customer, our customer involvement. So feedback that the customer may give to the company, demands coming from the customers, or overall specifics of our customer base. The process strategies enable our company to meet our customer requirements, keeping in mind what are the goals, the managerial goals of the organization. In process strategy is one of the most important components of operation management, because this will lead to very long-term effects in terms of efficiency of our transformation process, our cost structure, the quality which we are able to deliver to our customer base. The four basic process strategies are outlined in this slide. So moving from a lower volume to a higher volume, we will identify the process focus, which is generally used in manufacturing or in service, where we have less standardization and we have a higher level of customization, higher level of requirements from our customers. This is the process focus, which then lead to repetitive focus. This is generally when we have a batch or an assembly line kind of process, and then leading to commodity area. So this is usually at the end of a product life cycle. And this, in terms of process strategy, will be defined as product focus. And then, as you can see in the slide, we have this outlier, which is the mass customization. So the mass customization, as you can see, is able to achieve two very different objectives. So on one side, the mass customization is able to achieve a high volume. And on the other side, the mass customization is able to satisfy high variety. Essentially, companies are now trying to move from either process or repetitive or product focus towards mass customization. This is also the journey of Harley Davidson. Let's now take a look more granularly to each of these 4 process strategies. First, the process focus. So here is essentially when we have some specific activities, some specific processes. Generally, the personnel here would be highly qualified, highly skilled, whether we are in manufacturing or in professional services. In this type of process, we generally have very skilled personnel. Here we have higher cost, we have a lower equipment utilization. The flows of our production or our service delivery may fluctuate a lot, typically of projects. So all the organizations that are based on process, on project process, they have a lot of fluctuation. Think, for example, of movie production, think of management consulting. All of these industries have a lot of fluctuation. So for a period of time, they're very busy, and for some other period of time, they have little or even no work until they perform a new project. So an exemplification of a process focus, for instance, a hospital. So on one side, we have factors of low volume, high variety, and intermittent processes. We have a lot of inputs: surgery, sick patients, baby deliveries, emergency, and so on. We have a lot of different departments. We have a lot of different routes of our processes. And also we have several different outputs. Each patient is to an extent unique. Let's now take a look at the second strategy, which is the repetitive focus, which is also the Harley Davidson kind of strategy. So here, generally, we have an organization based on an assembly line. We have modularity, meaning that we combine parts and then we assemble parts together. And then these modules can lead to many different kind of output. Here we have less flexibility, but at the same time, we are able to ensure a more efficient and cost-effective type of process. An exemplification of this is Harley Davidson. So we have raw materials and different modules, inputs. For example, models could be the case of the wheels or the case of different type of engines. In all these initial module inputs then will be reduced to fewer modules, and then models will be combined together, leading to our output with many different combination of module cycle. So here, the aim is as much as we can to provide customization to our customers. The third type of process is the product focus. So here it's generally we are competing on a high volume. We don't have so much variety of products. In VCs, due to the fact that we are at the end of a product life cycle. When we are at the end of a product life cycle, we tend to offer less customization. We tend to offer less features because here generally, we are going to compete more on price. So we need to optimize our operation. We need to reduce our cost structure. Product focus means that we have continuous production, which implies high fixed costs, but generally we are able to keep the variable costs lowered. Labor usually here would be less skilled. Example of this in food production. So here we have a high volume combined with a lower variety in a continuous process. So as you can see, we have few inputs in potato chips production, and the output variation would be generally rather limited. So potato chips are all looking the same. Most of the differences would be made by the size of a package. And then we may add on top some flavors. So that would differentiate potato chips. Other than this, as you can see, customization is very limited. Mass customization is a way to try to optimize our operations. And here is where also the role of technology will help in the optimization of operation, but at the same time to ensure that we have higher flexibility. Example of this come from information technology industry, electronic device manufacturing. So with high volume paired with high variety, case in point is Dell computer. So we have many parts and components from the chips, the hard drive, software, and so on. We also have many modules in our manufacturing, but this will also lead to many output version with high level of customization. This has been a consistent trend. So if we analyze the differences between the 70s and 80s and 21st century, so we see how the mass customization has reshaped the way operations have been conducting in many traditional industry. You see the difference in vehicle styles. You see the difference in bicycle styles. But you also see that some industry, for example, mobile game applications, which was essentially invented by Apple with introduction in the market of the iPhone in 2007, 2008, are based precisely on this concept of mass customization. Generally speaking, all internet-enabled services and solutions really enjoy the benefits of a mass customization because they can keep the cost low, they can optimize their costs, but at the same time, they have high potential to scale and to provide with minimum variable cost, flexibility in customization for customers that would like to purchase or generally subscribe to internet services, internet solutions. The key characteristics of mass customization are generally a product design, which is key to enable this possibility of customize the product, but at the same time to keep the cost structure as low as possible. At the same time, the design of a process must ensure flexibility. In terms of stock and inventory, here also we need to be very efficient. And so we will rely on tightly controlled inventory management. And to ensure this, we also need to comply with tight schedules. And all of this can happen as long as we have responsive partners along the supply chain. We have continuous interaction and communication along the supply chain, which is enabled, as we have seen, by many of the Industry 4.0 solution with data transfer, data sharing in real time from suppliers to their clients and from original equipment manufacturer to the distribution network. So as you can see, the main characteristic of a mass customization, for instance, controlling the inventory, having tight schedules, being able to meet the high standards in terms of customization of our customer base is exactly what Harley-Davidson has aimed to achieve over the past decades. So to, in a way, lead back to the introduction case, so from what we understood of Harley-Davidson, so our Harley-Davidson from being a traditional manufacturer, meaning traditional manufacturer based on repetitive process. So then they moved to mass customization. And moving to mass customization implied that in terms of strategy, they made a complete U-turn from using repetitive focus as the main strategy to try to achieve the process strategy represented by mass customization. And in this way, we understand fully the implication of the introductory case of this video lecture. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the class. Bye.